Welcome to Standard 3B. The goal of this presentation is to describe the impact of religious conflicts, the Inquisition and Catholic Reformation on society and government actions. The essential knowledge we need for this standard is that even though our Reformation had roots, it had its basis in disagreements about theology. Theology is religious thinking. It led to important changes in economics and politics. In other words, it had changes in the economy and money and in government as well as religion. The other essential understanding we need is that these religious differences and the hatreds that they caused resulted in wars and destruction. Okay, so we're going to see some conflicts result from these religious disagreements. Our essential question, we really have two for this one. We'll break them down one at a time. Our first one, what were the major economic, again having to do with money, political, having to do with government, and theological, having to do with religion, issues involved in the Reformation? How did those things contribute to the split in Christianity? I'll be honest, I've always thought this was a strangely written standard. I think what the standard is going for is to use two geographic areas of Europe as examples as to how the Reformation played out. The standards use the word Germany, which, to be correct here, Germany is not going to form until the late 1800s. By Germany, we're referring here in 1500s to the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, and this area in dark brown here in Central Europe, that's now places like Germany, Switzerland, Austria, the Netherlands, was ruled by a family called the Habsburgs. Okay, and the Habsburgs were a powerful family that ruled this empire, and they were very Catholic. And as this was a time in history where it was expected that the people would follow the religion of their rulers. So the Habsburgs expected their people to remain Catholic, even though Martin Luther nails up the 95 Theses right in the middle of the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, so Martin Luther almost sets off an explosion, and the Habsburgs are saying, nope, you're going to ignore that man, and you're going to remain Catholic. That didn't sit well with everybody in the Holy Roman Empire. The empire was divided up into states. Okay, so you had the big empire ruled by the Habsburg family, whose rule was based here in Vienna, in the eastern part of the empire. The princes, especially in the northern part, you can see the green around Vienna representing Catholicism. Those were the states that remained loyal to the Catholic Church and followed the wishes of the Habsburg rulers. But the purple and the orangish yellow areas, those were the areas that converted to Protestantism. Those were the areas where the prince said, yeah, we hear you, Habsburgs, but we're going to follow Martin Luther in the yellow areas, or we're going to follow John Calvin in the purple areas. We can use almost the example of a school bus. Okay, the bus driver is here in Vienna, and the bus driver has fairly good control over the first few rows of seats. But the further back the bus you go, it's a little harder for the bus driver to keep control of what's going on here at the back of the bus. And these princes up here in the northern German states, they threw off the power and the authority of the Pope and ignored the wishes of the Habsburgs. That's going to result in a lot of tension, not just between the emperor and the princes, but between the people as well. And what we see here is the results of the devastating wars. Okay, the conflict between Protestants and Catholics and the hatred that developed. Even though these were both two groups of Christians, the religious divisions between them were going to justify in their minds killing each other. And that resulted in devastating wars, namely the 30 Years' War. And we see here on this map the population loss that it caused. Okay, these red areas are areas that over 50% of the population was killed or lost during that time, during those 30 years. Think about that length of time, and if we compare that to other wars, World War II, for example, the bloodiest war humans have fought, that went on for 6 years. The American Civil War over slavery, that went on for 4 years. But religion, for people who are religious, it's a motivator like no other. It's going to keep people going out to the battlefield year after year, decade after decade. And that's what happens here in the Holy Roman Empire during the 30 Years' War. Excuse me. The standards also use France, and France things play out a little bit different. That's not to say that things were peaceful in France during the Reformation. There was quite a bit of religious violence, including something called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, where over 3,000 people were killed from a wedding. I mean, it was a fight that started at a wedding, and 3,000 people, because of religious differences, get killed in about a weekend of fighting. But eventually the monarch of France makes a decision that the Habsburgs didn't make, and that was to grant religious tolerance. We can see here that France was a religiously divided country. Our yellow areas here, were the areas that were mainly Catholic, so mainly in the east and the north. Here in the south and the west, we see the pink representing Protestant areas, and then we have some divided areas in orange. They look fairly equal, but if we take a look here, we can see that these dots here representing the bigger French cities, they're mainly all in the Catholic area. So even though it looks equal on the map in terms of area, the population was really majority Catholic in France, and the ruling family of France was Catholic as well. But in 1598, they make the decision that they're going to grant the French Protestant minority, who were known by the name Huguenots. That's a term we want to associate with France and the Reformation. French Protestants were known as Huguenots. And the King of France is going to give them religious freedom of worship, in a document called the Edict of Nantes. Okay, and that document will pretty much say, not real thrilled that you're Protestant in Catholic France, but we're done trying to beat you up. We're not going to try and kill you. We've got other things to do. Okay, so that's a kind of a difference here between the Holy Roman Empire handling the Reformation and France. That's not to say that France isn't involved heavily in the Reformation. This guy, the standards single out Cardinal Richelieu. A cardinal in the Catholic Church is a high-ranking religious official. But this wasn't just any high-ranking religious official. He was also a high-ranking government advisor. Okay, he was an advisor to the king, and under his advisement to the French King Louis XIV, that Edict of Nantes, which was written in 1598, about 50 years later, gets ripped up and ignored. Okay, Protestants are put on notice. It's not okay that you're Protestant in France anymore. France also becomes involved in the 30 Years' War next door, which started off, as we mentioned, as a religious war between Catholics and Protestants, but now France is going to get involved in the Holy Roman Empire's war and make this a big political conflict. Okay, the second part of our standard revolves around the question, how did the Catholic Church respond to the Protestant Reformation? When Martin Luther nails up those 95 theses, the Catholic Church, they're not just going to roll over and not do anything. Okay, as Luther and Calvin and Henry start removing members from the Catholic Church, as the church starts losing members, they're going to start to respond to the Protestant Reformation. And the response of the Catholic Church, well, we'll take a step back here. I've kind of always thought that these guys belonged in Standard 3A with the other reformers. We want to know these two dissenters. And dissenters is another word for disagreeers. These are other people who disagreed with the church before Martin Luther. But they didn't start their own religion. They didn't go out like Luther and Calvin and Henry and begin their own religions. A guy in England named John Wycliffe, who believed that the Bible should be written in the language of the people. The Bible had always been written in Latin, and John Wycliffe was a religious figure in England saying, why do I need to learn another language to read the Bible? Can't I get a Bible in English? Jan Hus, or John Huss in English, he's actually executed. He's burned at the stake for his disagreements with the church. But neither of these guys go so far as Luther in starting their own church, but we do want to know them as disagreeers or dissenters before Martin Luther came along. The response of the Catholic Church is known as the Catholic Reformation, the Catholic Reform. It's also known as the Counter-Reformation, which is why we have this clock above my shoulder here. If we think of that word counter, if we were to move the hands of the clock counterclockwise, we'd be going back in time. I moved my finger the wrong way. If we moved our finger this way, we move the hands of the clock, we would be going back in time. That's really what the Catholic Church wanted to do. They wanted to reverse the hands of time to before Martin Luther, almost like it never happened. The Church convenes a meeting in 1545 called the Council of Trent. Not the guy's name Trent referring to the Italian city of Trento in northern Italy. And at that meeting, the church is going to discuss what's going on, and out of this meeting comes a reaffirmation. They're going to confirm again that the Catholic Church was right. The church doctrine and practices were the correct ones, and the Protestant doctrines and practices, the Protestant beliefs, were incorrect. Another response the church has is what are known as the Jesuits, or more formally the Society of Jesus. These were a group of priests, or an order of priests, that was formed to be both teachers and priests. And their mission was to spread the Catholic faith around the world through education by starting schools. Today in the United States, colleges like Boston College in Boston, and Fordham in New York City, Georgetown in Washington, D.C. The guy's name was Ignatius Loyola, so anything with Loyola in it, like Loyola Marymount or Loyola University, those are Jesuit universities founded to spread the Catholic religion. So that was another response to the formation of these teacher priests known as Jesuits. The third response that the church has was a legal response called the Inquisition. The church established religious courts, and their job was to try people accused of being disloyal. The legal term, or the official term, was heresy. If you were accused of being a heretic, it meant you're being disloyal to your religion. Here we see the famous scientist Galileo, who had to go before this religious court. We see the priest here and the various religious figures acting as judge and jury. Galileo had to defend himself because he made the assertion that the sun was the center. He was defending scientists like Copernicus, who said that the sun was the center of the universe at a time when the church said that the earth was. And for being accused of being disloyal, Galileo had to appear before this court. In fact, he spent the last 12 years of his life under house arrest, as a punishment from the Inquisition. Some other people got far worse. There were some very strange and disturbing tortures devised during this time as well that could be imposed by the Inquisition. But the Catholic Counter-Reformation, the Catholic Church's response, we want to know the Council of Trent, the meeting. We want to know the Jesuits, the teacher priests who were formed, and the Inquisition, the religious courts.